My name is Liam Whitaker, and I'm 22. This is the story of the week last July when the Atlantic Ocean smelled like freedom and everything else smelled like the end of the world as I'd known it. I'd just finished my degree in marine biology at UNC Wilmington, which sounded impressive until you realized I had no job, no grad school acceptance yet, and exactly $312 in my checking account. So I did the only thing a Carolina boy with salt water in his veins can do when the future looks blurry. I pointed my rust-flaked Jeep west and drove the 4 hours. Home to my parents' cedar-shingled house on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Mom had already left for her annual solo sailing trip down to the British Virgin Islands. 2 weeks of just her, a 38-foot catamaran, and whatever audiobooks she'd loaded onto her phone. She'd been doing it every summer since the divorce was finalized when I was 12. Dad called it therapeutic abandonment. Mom called it reclaiming the horizon. Either way, it meant the house on Pamlico Sound would be just me and Dad for 9 days. Dad is Jack Whitaker, ex-commercial fisherman turned charter captain. 6'3" of quiet competence and weathered skin. 48 years old, still built like the linebacker he'd been at East Carolina. Only now the muscle had settled into something denser, more permanent. He spoke in short sentences, if he spoke at all, and kept his feelings locked somewhere between the tide charts and the engine room of his boat. Second wind. I dropped my duffel on the scuffed pine floor and yelled, "I'm here, Captain." From the back porch came the familiar gravel reply, "Beer's cold. Bring one." That was the longest conversation we'd had in 3 months. I was halfway through the kitchen when he added, almost as an afterthought, "Noah's coming by later, bringing ribs from Big Oak. We'd eat on the dock." My stomach lurched so hard I nearly dropped the beer I'd just grabbed. Noah Caldwell, Dad's best friend since they were 18 and stupid and tried to surf Hurricane Floyd on stolen longboards. Noah was 46 now, black, broad-shouldered, with a voice like dark rum and a laugh that could start an engine. He owned 3 barbecue joints along the coast, wore linen shirts the color of sunsets, and had been openly gay since before I was born. Dad never blinked when Noah came out at 25, just clapped him on the back and said, "Good, more girls for me," and that was that. Their friendship was the one immovable object in both their lives. I, on the other hand, had been in love with Noah Caldwell since I was 15, and he taught me how to clean a fish without slicing my own hand off. I'd spent years convinced it was a fluke, a phase, a proximity crush I'd grow out of the second I left for college. Turns out, distance only made the ache sharper, like a hook set deeper. I took a long pull of beer and tried to sound normal. "Cool, I like ribs." Dad just grunted and went back to staring at the water like it owed him money by the time the sun bled out across the sound. Turning everything bronze and rose, Noah's silver Tacoma rolled down the shell driveway. He climbed out with a foil pan in one hand and a brown paper bag in the other. White linen shirt open at the collar, silver just starting to thread through his short beard. When he smiled at me across the yard, it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. "Liam James Whitaker," he drawled, voice warm as pulled pork. "Look at you, all grown in shit." He hugged me without asking, one-armed and solid, smelling like hickory smoke and salt and something citrus that made my head swim. I hugged back too long, then stepped away fast. Cheeks on fire, Dad was already firing up the grill on the dock. Pretending not to notice anything, we ate ribs with our fingers. Sauce on our chins, while the sky did impossible things above us. Dad told the same 3 fishing stories he always told. Noah laughed in all the right places and added new details Dad had apparently forgotten. I mostly stayed quiet, stealing glances at Noah's hands-long fingers, calloused from years of pulling crab pots and turning brisket, the way his throat moved when he swallowed sweet tea, the small scar above his left eyebrow. I'd asked about when I was 10 and never forgotten the answer. Shark cage in South Africa. 2004. Long story. At some point, Dad's phone buzzed. He frowned at it, wiped his hands, and stood. "Gotta take this." One of the mates might have lost a prop. Looked at me. Then Noah. Don't let the boy drink all my beer. And then he was gone. Boots thumping up the dock toward the house, leaving me and Noah alone under a sky full of first stars. For a minute, we just listened to the water slap. The pilings. Noah spoke first, soft. "You okay, Lee?" I laughed, but it came out cracked. Define okay. He turned on the bench to face me fully, one knee pulled up, arm draped across the back of the seat. The dock light caught the gold in his eyes. "Talk to me." And God help me. I did. I told him everything I'd never told anyone. Not my college roommate. Not the therapist I saw twice and ghosted. Not even the mirror at 3 a.m. how I dated girls in high school, because it was expected on this island. How I'd kissed boys in dorm rooms and felt nothing but panic afterward. How every time I thought about coming out to Dad, I pictured that same flat okay. And when I told him I was switching majors from business to biology. How I was terrified I'd end up 48 and still unable to say what I actually felt. Noah listened the way he listened to everything, fully, patiently, like the world had paused just for this. When I finished, my voice raw and my face wet, he didn't offer platitudes. He reached out, slow enough that I could have moved away, and brushed a thumb across my cheek, wiping salt or tears or both. "Your daddy loves you," he said quietly. "He just doesn't have the vocabulary. Jack Whitaker would have died for me when half the town turned their backs. He just can't say the words. Doesn't mean he doesn't feel them." I swallowed hard. "And what about you?" He went still. The air between us turned electric, thick as storm clouds. "Liam," he said, my name rough in his mouth. "I'm 24 years older than you. I've known you since you needed a booster seat." "I'm not a kid anymore," I cut in, voice shaking. "I know exactly what I'm asking." "And who?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he exhaled, something shaky and almost frightened, and leaned forward until his forehead rested against mine. "I noticed," he whispered. "God help me. I noticed the day you turned 21 and walked across. Your daddy's deck in nothing but board shorts and that goddamn smile. I've been telling myself it was wrong every day since. My heart was trying to punch through my ribs. Is it still wrong?" He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "It's complicated as hell, but it doesn't feel wrong. Not when it's you." I kissed him then. Or maybe he kissed me. It doesn't matter. It was soft at first, careful, like we were both afraid the other would vanish. Then it wasn't soft at all. It was teeth and tongue and 22 years of want on my side. 24 years of restraint on his, all of it colliding under a Carolina sky that didn't judge. We broke apart when we heard Dad's boots on the dock again. Far enough away that we had time to separate, to wipe our mouths. To pretend we'd just been talking about grad schools. Dad looked at us, frowned slightly like he sensed the charge in the air, then shrugged it off the way he shrugged off everything that threatened emotion. "Lost prop," he muttered. "Gonna be a late night tomorrow." I stood, smooth as ever. "I should head out." "Early smoke tomorrow." Dad nodded. I walked Noah to his truck because I couldn't not at the driver's door, hidden in the shadow of the cab. Cupped my face with both hands. "This doesn't have to be one night," he said fiercely. "But it can't be rushed either. Your daddy's my brother in every way that matters. We do this, we do it careful. We do it honest. You understand?" I nodded, throat too tight for words. He kissed me once more. Quick and hard, then climbed in and drove away. Taillights disappearing down the Shell Road. The rest of the week unfolded like tide cycles. Mornings, Dad and I on the boat. Quiet the way we'd always been, but something easing between us. Like the air itself was learning how to breathe. Afternoons. Texts from Noah that made me grin like an idiot. Thinking about your mouth. Thinking about the way you say my name when you're nervous. Thinking we should take the skiff out. Tomorrow night, just us. Evenings. The three of us on the dock again. Eating whatever Noah brought. Dad slowly noticing I wasn't the same withdrawn kid who'd left for college. He never asked outright, but I caught him watching me and Noah. Something wary and thoughtful in his eyes. On the 6th night, Mom called from Tortola, laughing and half drunk on painkillers, asking if we'd burned the house down yet. Dad handed me the phone. I told her I loved her, that everything was good, better than good. She was quiet a second, then said, "You sound different, baby." Happy, different. I told her, "Yeah." I was the last night Noah came after Dad had passed out in his recliner with a baseball game, muttering in the background. We slipped down to the private beach behind the house, past the sea oats, and made love on an old quilt with the ocean roaring approval 10 feet away. It was slow and overwhelming and perfect, his hands steady when mine shook, his voice in my ear telling me I was beautiful, that I was home, that we would figure it out. Later, lying tangled and salt-crusted under the moon, I asked the question I'd been carrying for years. What happens when I tell him? Noah was quiet a long time, fingers tracing idle patterns on my back. "He'll be mad at me first," he said finally. "Then he'll be scared for you. Then, because he's Jack, and he loves us both more than he knows how to say, he'll come around. Might take a while. Might be ugly for a minute. But he will." Turned out Noah was right about everything. Except how long it took, Dad found out 3 weeks later when he came home early and caught Noah kissing me goodbye on the front porch like it was the most natural thing in the world. There were yelling. Mostly Dad at Noah. There were slammed doors. There was a week where Dad wouldn't look at me, and Noah wouldn't come around. Then one morning I found Dad on the dock at dawn, his coffee in one hand, staring at the water like it had betrayed him. I sat down without asking. We didn't speak for a long time. Finally he said, voice rough, "I ain't mad you're gay, son. Been knowing that since you were 14 and cried when we had to put old Ranger down? I'm mad. I'm losing my best friend." "You're not losing him," I said quietly. "You're gaining a son-in-law, if you can stand it." He was quiet so long I thought he hadn't heard me. Then he reached over and gripped the back of my neck, the way he used to when I was little and scared of storms. "You happy?" he asked. "Yeah, Dad. Happier than I've ever been." He nodded once, hard, eyes wet, though he'd deny it forever. "Then I'll get there," he said. "Just give me a minute to catch up." Noah and I got married 2 years later on that same dock barefoot, the tide coming in and Mom crying happy tears into her champagne. Dad stood up as my best man Noah already had his brother, and gave a speech that was exactly 9 words long. "Treat him right or I'll kick your ass. Welcome to the family." Then he hugged Noah so hard I heard ribs creak. Sometimes love isn't fireworks. Sometimes it's just salt water on skin and the long, slow realization that family isn't only the people who raise you. Sometimes it's the people who help you raise yourself. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, it's both. The night was thick with late summer heat, the kind that made the cicadas scream and the air feel like wet cotton. Mom and Alina were inside doing dishes, their laughter drifting through the open kitchen window like smoke. Dud and Julian, and Elena's husband Marco, had migrated to the patio with their second bottle of Malbec. Talking in low, easy voices about the lake house they kept threatening to buy together, about the Bears' new quarterback, about everything and nothing. I sat on the edge of the conversation the way I always did, half in, half out, smiling when expected, answering when spoken to. Watching? Marco had always been good at pulling me in. "Leo, you still drawing those creepy cool monsters?" he asked, tipping his glass toward me. He remembered. Of course he remembered. He'd been the one who bought me the fancy marker set the Christmas I was 15. It's the one who told me, "Talent like that doesn't hide in sketchbooks forever, kid." I was 24 now. It's not a kid. But the words still lived in the space between us, like a third person at the table. Dad's phone buzzed. He frowned at it. "Hospital," he muttered. "Already standing. I'll be 10 minutes." He disappeared inside, screen door slapping shut behind him. And then it was just Marco and me under the string lights, the candles guttering in their mason jars. Citronella sharpened my nose. He leaned back in his Adirondack chair, long legs stretched out, eyes on me. "So," he said quietly, "Hour. You really doing, Leo? Not the casual check-in adults give you when they're being polite? A real question. It's the kind that reaches in and hooks something behind your ribs." I swallowed the last of my ginger beer. "I'm figuring it out." He gave me the look. The one that said he could wait all night. The darkness and the wine and the sudden privacy cracked me open. "I'm 24 and I'm sleeping in the twin bed I outgrew in middle school," I said. "I have a BFA that costs more than this house, and the only job I can get is weekend barista shifts. I came out to Mom and Dad last year, and Dad still introduces me as my son, the artist, like it's a hobby I'll grow out of. I feel like a fucking failure, and I'm terrified everyone can smell it on me." Marco didn't flinch. He just listened the way he always had. My words were the only thing in the world worth hearing right then, and I feel like I'm letting him down. I went on, the words spilling faster. "Like moving back here is proof I couldn't hack it in the city. Like being queer is just one more way I didn't turn out how he pictured." Marco set his glass down carefully. "Can I tell you something about your father?" I nodded. "Julian Moreau spent 30 years pretending feelings were optional," he said, fondness and exasperation braided together in his voice. "He grew up in a house where men fixed things with their hands and never ever talked about what hurt. Then his only kid comes home and says, 'Hey Dad, I like boys,' and it cracked the whole damn foundation. Not because he loves you less, because he suddenly had to look at every place he'd lied to himself." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" Marco glanced toward the house, then back at me. "That's his story to tell, but I can tell you this. He's proud of you, terrified for you maybe, confused as hell, but proud. He just doesn't have the vocabulary yet." My eyes stung. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" He laughed softly. "Decades of therapy and a very patient husband." He paused. "Coming out at 43 will teach you a few things about shame and courage." He'd told me and Sophie the year I was a sophomore in college, quiet and matter of fact, over Christmas Eve lasagna. "Alina and I are separating. I've met someone. His name is Daniel," Ahmed cried. Not from shock, but from relief that he was finally happy. Dad had shaken Dad's hand like it was a business merger. I just stared at Marco, stunned that the man I'd idolized since I was 8 had been carrying the same secret I was terrified to voice. "How about you?" he asked now. "Dating anyone?" My stomach flipped. "Not really." He tilted his head. "Define, really." "There were guys in Chicago. A couple hookups. One almost boyfriend who ghosted me after I brought him to a gallery opening. But nobody." I stopped, throat closing. "Nobody." "What?" "Nobody who felt like home," I whispered. The air changed. The cicadas seemed to hush. Even the candles burned quieter. Marco studied me for a long moment. "Leo," I couldn't breathe. "Is there something you want to tell me?" 6 years of wanting surged up my throat like bile. I was 24 and shaking like a teenager. "I've been in love with you since I was 18, I said, the words scraping raw. "The summer. You and Daniel helped us move Sophie into Northwestern, and you wore that stupid faded DePaul shirt, and you carried 6 boxes at once like it was nothing, and you looked at me when I thanked you like I actually mattered. I know you're married. I know you're Dad's best friend. I know I'm just Julian and Carmen's screwed-up kid to you." I had to say it once. Just once. Silence. A brutal, ringing silence. Then, "Look at me, Leo." It did. Slowly. Terrified. His face in the candlelight was unreadable at first. Then something shifted. Not disgust. Not pity. Something aching and complicated and warm. "How long have you been carrying that?" he asked, voice rough. 6 years, give or take. He exhaled, like I'd punched him. "Jesus, I'm sorry. Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't apologize for feelings. Ever." He dragged a hand through his silvering hair. "You're not a kid to me, Leo. You haven't been for longer than I should probably admit. But Daniel, I know." My voice cracked. "I know. I'm not asking for anything. I couldn't keep pretending." He looked at me for a long, long time. "I need you to hear me," he said finally. "Really hear me? What you feel? It's not wrong. It's not disgusting. It's not trivial. But there are lines, friendship, family, vows that I won't cross, not because I don't see you, but because I do." My chest caved in, relief and grief at once. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fierce. "That doesn't mean you're alone in this. Doesn't mean your heart is foolish. It doesn't mean you won't find someone who looks at you the way you deserve to be looked at. Someone who can give you everything without tearing the world down to do it. Tears slipped hot down my cheeks. Couldn't stop them. Marco reached out, hesitated, then rested his hand on my knee just a moment, warm and steady. You are extraordinary, Leo Moreau. You are going to be loved so fiercely one day it'll knock you on your ass. I'm sorry it can't be me, but I'm not sorry you told me. From inside, Dad's laugh boomed call over. Footsteps on the deck. Marco squeezed my knee once, then let go. We're okay, he said quietly. You and me always. Dad stepped out, oblivious, carrying a fresh bottle. You two solving the world's problems without me? Marco smiled at me, soft and sad and sure. Something like that. I wiped my face quickly, managed a shaky laugh, just telling Marco he's getting old. Dad snorted, refilling glasses. He's been old since we were 20. The conversation drifted back to football and lake houses. I sat there in the warm dark, heart cracked open and strangely light. The weight of 6 years finally shared. Across the table, Marco caught my eye and lifted his glass in a tiny, private toast. To honesty, 2 impossible things, to surviving them anyway. I lifted mine back. The summer I turned 22. I came home to Seattle after graduating from RISD with a BFA in graphic design and no idea what came next. My dad, Victor Navarro, was a contractor who'd built half the custom homes in West Seattle. A man who spoke in measurements and torque settings, and rarely in feelings. His best friend since their army days was Julian Hart, tall, dark-haired, perpetually calm, the kind of man who could quiet a room just by walking into it. Julian was openly gay, divorced, 15 years older than me, and the quiet center of every memory I had of growing up. I'd been in love with him since I was 16. Not a crush. Not hero worship. Love. The kind that sat in your sternum like a second heartbeat and made you stupid on quiet nights. I knew every cadence of his laugh, the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was thinking. The small scar above his left eyebrow from a bar fight in Kandahar he never talked about. I knew he took his coffee black, that he listened to Coltrane when he couldn't sleep, that he still sent my dad a handwritten card every year on the anniversary of their discharge. I knew because I paid attention in the way only a kid carrying a secret can. The night I told him we were on Julian's deck overlooking Puget Sound, Dad was inside on a work call. Something about permits and a delayed inspection. Julian and I had been drinking red wine he pretended not to notice I was too young for when I was home from college. The sky was the color of bruised peaches. I need to say something, I said. My voice cracked like I was 15 again. Julian turned, elbows on the railing, patient. I'm listening, Milo. I couldn't look at him. I've been in love with you for 6 years, and I'm tired of pretending that's going to change. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the fairies in the distance. When I finally risked a glance, his face was unreadable. Milo, he said, soft, careful. Look at me.
Dad.
His eyes were the same storm cloud gray they'd always been, but something in them had shifted. You're brilliant, he said. You're kind. You see people in a way most never learn. And if I'd met you in some other life, where I wasn't your father's best friend, where I wasn't 39 to your 22, where everything wasn't tangled up in 20 years of history, Christ, I don't know that I'd have the strength to say no. My lungs forgot how to work. But this life isn't some other life, he went on. Vic is my brother in every way that matters. And you, his voice caught. You deserve someone who can love you out in the open. Not someone who'd have to hide it, lie about it, risk blowing up the only family he has left. I wouldn't ask you to lie, I said. I'd wait. However long it took, he closed his eyes like the words physically hurt. You think that's fair? To ask a kid fresh out of college to put his life on hold for a man who might never be brave enough. You're the bravest person I know. He laughed once, short and broken. You don't know the half of it. Dad's footsteps sounded inside. Julian straightened, the mask sliding back into place like it had never slipped. The rest of the night, he was the same steady Julian, asking about my thesis show, teasing Dad about his inability to use the espresso machine he'd installed last Christmas. When he left, he hugged me goodbye the way he always did, one-armed and brief, but his mouth brushed my ear. We're not done talking, he murmured. But not here. Not like this. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, replaying every word, every almost. The next morning, Dad was in the garage building a cedar planter for Mom's tomatoes. He didn't look up when I came in, just nudged a second mug of coffee across the workbench. Julian called, he said. Said he talked to you last night? Said I should probably talk to you too. I went still. Dad set down his chisel. I'm not good at this shit, Milo. You know that. When you came out at 17, I didn't know what the hell to say, so I said nothing. Figured if I didn't make a big deal, you'd know I was fine with it. He rubbed a hand over his graying beard. Turns out, silence feels like disapproval when you're a scared kid. Julian kicked my ass about it. Has been for years. I'm slow, but I get there. I swallowed hard. Dad, I love you, he said. Gruff. Nothing about who you love changes that. I just needed you to hear it out loud. We didn't hug. We're not those people. But he handed me a sanding block, and we worked side by side until the planter was glass smooth. 3 days later, Julian texted, Can you come over? Vic knows. Said he trusts me. I drove to his place in Capitol Hill. It's a narrow brick townhouse with too many books and a kitchen that smelled like cedar and coffee. He opened the door in faded jeans, in a University of Washington hoodie, barefoot, hair still damp from a shower. He looked exhausted. Inside, he didn't sit across from me this time. He sat on the same couch, close enough that our knees almost touched. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I've never told Vic. Something I've only told my therapist, and once a priest who didn't speak much English. He took a breath that shook. I was in love with your father for almost 10 years. I stared. Not like that, he said quickly. Not anymore. But back then when we were 25, 26, sharing that shithole apartment in Tacoma after we got out, I was in love with him. Hopelessly. He was straight and loud and fearless, and I was quiet and terrified and trying to pray it out of me. I watched him date half the base, stood up at his wedding, held you the day you were born while he cried like an idiot. Psst. He gave a watery laugh. I got over it. Eventually, therapy. Distance. Time. But I know exactly what unrequited feels like when the person you want is woven into every corner of your life. I couldn't speak, so when you stood on my deck and looked at me like I could be your whole world, he said, voice rough, it wasn't theoretical. I know how much it costs to love someone you're not allowed to have. He reached out, slow enough that I could pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I'm not saying never, Milo. I'm saying not now. Not like this. You're 22. You have no idea who you're going to be at 30. And he stopped. I need to earn the right to even consider it, which means being the adult here, which means giving you space to live an entire life I'm not in the center of. Tears slipped down my cheeks without permission. So here's what I can offer, he said. Friendship. Real friendship. I'll introduce you to every designer I know in this city. I'll kick your ass when you undersell yourself. I'll be the first person you call when you get your heart broken by someone who isn't me. And if, in 5 years, you still look at me the way you did on that deck, we'll have a different conversation. On equal ground, no power imbalance. No secrets from Vic. 5 years felt like a lifetime and a heartbeat at once. And if I meet someone else? I asked. His jaw flexed. Then I'll smile and buy him a drink and mean it. Because that's what loving someone actually looks like sometimes. He pulled me into a hug then. No pretense. No audience. I buried my face in his shoulder and cried like a kid while he held me together. 5 years later, almost to the day, I was 27 and running late to my own gallery opening. My first solo show, the space was packed. Dad was in the corner arguing with the caterer about shrimp portions. Mom was crying over the price tags. I was adjusting one of the frames when arms slid around my waist from behind. Still the most beautiful man in the room, Julian whispered against my ear. I turned. He was 44 now, silver just starting at his temples. Wearing the navy suit I'd picked out for him last month when we moved in together, Dad had grunted, Mom had sobbed, and somewhere in the background Julian had looked at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking for 20 years. Told you 5 years, he said. Soft enough only I could hear. I kissed him in front of 75 people and my entire family. Dad cleared his throat loudly behind us. Jesus Christ, get a room. Some of us are trying to enjoy the free booze. Julian laughed into my shoulder. Later, when the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, he found me on the back patio. Still sure? He asked. I took his hand. I was sure at 16. I'm surer now. He kissed my knuckles, the way he'd wanted to for a decade and never let himself. Some loves are worth waiting for. Some loves are worth growing into. Ours was both. The summer I turned 24, I moved back into my mother's old house in Asheville, North Carolina, after flaming out in Atlanta. The graphic design startup I'd co-founded with 2 college friends had collapsed under bad funding and worse decisions, mostly mine. I had $12 in my checking account, a suitcase of clothes that no longer fit the person I was pretending to be, and a heart that felt like it had been run over by something very slow and very heavy, my mother's best friend. Daniel Caldwell was the one who picked me up from the bus station. Daniel had always been around, tall, quiet, with kind gray eyes and a carpenter's hands that could turn scrap wood into furniture that made people cry. He and Mom had met in their early 30s at a grief support group after both their spouses died young. They never dated. They just became each other's person. When Mom got sick 3 years ago, Daniel was the one who sat with her through chemo, who learned to cook the soft food she could keep down, who held her hand at the end. After the funeral, he kept showing up, to fix the leaking gutter, to mow the lawn, to make sure I ate something other than cereal straight from the box. I had always loved Daniel in the background way. Children love the steady adults who orbit their parents. Then I came home broken at 24, newly out to myself and terrified of it, and everything tilted. Suddenly, every small thing about him, the way he pushed his hair back when he was thinking, the low rumble of his laugh, the calm way he could look at you and make you feel seen without being judged, became unbearable. I wanted him with an intensity that embarrassed me. I wanted him to choose me the way he had chosen my mother, except not platonically. I wanted the impossible. It built slowly. Late-night talks on the back porch after he'd spent the day repairing Mom's bookshelves. The way he listened when I finally stuttered out that I thought I might be gay and had no idea what to do with that. The way he never flinched, just said, "Okay, Eli, we'll figure it out together." The way he made space for me to fall apart without ever making me feel small for it. One October night, after too much bourbon and not enough sense, I told him. We were in the workshop behind the house, sawdust in the air, the smell of linseed oil thick around us. I was handing him tools while he planed a piece of walnut the color of dark honey. "Daniel," said, voice cracking like a 12-year-old's, "I'm in love with you." The planer stopped. The silence was huge. He set the tool down carefully, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at me for a long time. "Eli," he said at last, gentle, devastating, "I'm flattered. More than that, I'm honored that you trust me enough to say it out loud. But I'm not the answer you're looking for." I started shaking. "You don't feel anything?" He exhaled, slow and pained. "I love you. You know that? But not the way you want. And even if I did, sweetheart, I couldn't. You're Sarah's son. I promised her I'd look after you, not—" He stopped, shook his head. "It would be wrong in ways I can't even list. And it would hurt you worst of all." I wanted to argue, to beg, to say age didn't matter, grief didn't matter, none of it mattered. Instead, I just cried, ugly and loud, and he let me. When it passed, he pulled me into a hug that was careful, brotherly. "Final, I'm going to help you get out of here," he said against my hair. "Not because I want you gone, because you deserve a life that isn't built on longing for something you can't have." The next weeks were brutal. I avoided him at first, mortified. Then, slowly, I let him back in, because I had no one else. He introduced me to a furniture maker friend in Knoxville who needed branding and a website. He made me finish my portfolio instead of doom scrolling. He sat with me while I applied for remote design jobs in apartments I couldn't yet afford. He never let me flirt again, never let the air get thick. Boundaries. Clear and kind by January, I had enough steady freelance work to rent a tiny loft above a coffee shop in the River Arts District. My first night there, Daniel helped me carry up the thrift store couch. When we were done, he stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, throat tight. "I will be." He smiled, small and proud. "That's my guy." I laughed wetly. "Don't say that. Makes me want to kiss you again." He didn't laugh back. "Eli, I know. Boundaries." I held up both hands. "I'm working on it." He left, and I didn't sleep. But the next morning I opened my laptop and took on another client and another, till the ache became background noise instead of a scream. Spring came. I made friends at the print cop. I went on dates that didn't feel like sabotage. One night in May, I met Noah, a soft-spoken ceramicist with freckles across his nose and a laugh that made my chest loosen. We got coffee, then dinner, then kept finding excuses to see each other. In July, Daniel started dating someone, a high school history teacher named Marcus. I met him at a cookout Daniel hosted and was stunned to discover I liked him immediately. He was kind, funny, absolutely unimpressed by Daniel's brooding carpenter thing. When Daniel put a hand on the small of Marcus's back, something inside me unclenched for good. A year later, almost to the day, I had my first solo show at a small gallery on Lexington Avenue. Prints, branding work, album covers I'd done for local bands. The place was packed. Noah stood beside me in a navy blazer that matched my trembling excitement. Daniel and Marcus arrived together. Daniel in the same soft flannel he always wore. Marcus carrying a ridiculous bouquet of sunflowers near the end of the night. Daniel found me by the dessert table. "You did this?" he said. "Simply, we both know you made half the phone calls." He shook his head. I opened doors. "You built the house, Eli?" Looked at him. Older, yes, gray threading his temples now, but still the steadiest thing I'd ever known. The wanting hadn't vanished entirely. Some quiet ember would probably always glow. But it no longer owned me, thank you, I said. For not letting me settle for the wrong thing. He pulled me into a hug, quick and fierce. "Thank you for growing up anyway." Later, Noah and I walked home through the warm dark, my hand in his, the echo of applause still in my ears. I thought about the boy who'd come home shattered, convinced that loving Daniel was the only way to feel whole. I thought about how gently, how firmly Daniel had refused to let me stay broken. Turned out the greatest love he ever gave me wasn't the kind I begged for on the workshop floor. It was the love that said, "No, not like this, because you are worth more." And for the first time in my life, I believed it.